What's up guys, this is Rocky Mountain Java, and in this channel we're going to be learning about FRC Java. FRC is First Robotics Competition. It's essentially where a team of people get around and build a robot for first game that is announced in January of every year, and we build a robot for that game, and whoever gets the most points in a specific round of that game wins the match. And it gets pretty competitive at times. So if you are a beginner programmer that's just getting started into FRC, or if you want this channel as a reference, this is the right place for you. We're going to be teaching Java specifically for FRC. Well, first of all, what is Java? Java is a programming language like C++ and Python. It basically allows humans to write code, and computers interpret code in a different way than us, and it's not very readable. We make it into programming languages, and now we can write code, we can interpret it, and it's very fun. Now, Java is a type of a programming language, and it focuses on object-oriented programming, which we'll get into later, and it's extremely wordy. Alright, let's talk about the basics of Java. So now I'm in my computer. I have opened up an IDE which allows me to write and run code, and I've created a file called main.java. Now we're going to go ahead and start writing code in Java. Now make sure to note this down. Everything in Java has to be associated with a class. So basically we're going to first write public class main, right? So what this means is that we're creating a class that is public, which means that it can be accessed anywhere throughout our code or globally, and this main here must match my file name. So since I named my file main.java, I must name my class main. So that's something important that you must remember. Now we're going to go ahead and write public static void main string arc. So this is what I was talking about Java being a very wordy language. So what this means is that we're creating a main method that returns nothing. So this void keyword means that it doesn't return any variable, any integer, or any double, or anything like that. It doesn't return anything. And this public, again, means that it can be accessed globally. So now let's talk about variable declarations. How do you declare variables in Java? So first of all, what are variables? Variables are basically things that hold values. So for example, I could put 3 in a variable. I could put a word in a variable, something like that. So first, let's start with how to create a variable. So we need, first of all, a type and then name. That's the format of a variable. We first need the variable type, then we name it. And that's how you declare a variable. Now, initializing a variable is actually giving the variable name a value. So for example, I could give it a value like this. That's how you make variables in Java. Well, if I wanted to put numbers and just integers, no decimals, but just plain old negative to positive numbers, I would put down int. That's my variable type. And I would call it something like first variable, right? Now we have we have declared a variable with an integer variable called first variable. Now if I wanted to give it a value, I would do something like 3. Now what if I wanted to make a variable that could hold decimals? Now you could use either float or double, but for this case I will use double. So go ahead and type in double, and I'm going to say decimal. And if you wanted to put in a decimal, you would have to use a double. So I'd say 3.2. Now I can have decimals. Now, if you wanted to put in a word for your variable, you would have to type in string. String word is equal to, now this is important, all strings or a series of characters must be represented inside double quotation marks. That's important. So I'll say hello world, right? Char is basically just a single character. So, for example, I'll say char ch is equal to, let's say, the first character of hello world, which is h. Now this is important because now I'm using single quotation marks for characters and double quotation marks for full-on words and strings. Now the last variable type that I'll go into is Boolean. Oh, spelled that wrong. Boolean there. And I'll call this B. And a Boolean can hold either true or false. Alright, so now we're going to talk about how to output text in Java. So what you're going to write is system.out.print line, print line, there we go, and put parentheses, double parentheses, and now we're going to put double quotation marks, 2 of them, and inside the double quotation marks put any text that we want. So we can say, for example, hello world, and then do that, and then close everything with a semicolon. Everything has to end with a semicolon, as you can see here. So now if I go ahead and run, it should open a terminal. There it is. It's building the code. And yes, there we go. It said hello world and process finished with exit code 0. So now we can also output what's in variables as well. So this print ln makes sure that it prints a new line after each iteration. So for example, after I've written hello world, it will create a new line after that, so that I don't have to write manually write a new line character, which is \n. So system.out.println, you're going to keep the same. And then instead of having double quotes, you're just going to put the variable name. So I'm going to put word, because that also has hello world. Now if I run this, it should output 2 hello worlds. There we go. Hello world, hello world. This also works with numerical variables. For example, I have declared an integer variable called first variable, and it holds the number 3. And I can say system.out.println first variable, right? And then close it out. And actually, I can output more things than that. And let's run the code. Now I do have hello world 3, 3.2, and false, which matches whatever I put in here. Now let's take a look at conditional statements. They basically are blocks of code that occur and run when a specific condition is met. So the first conditional statement that we'll talk about is if. The if statement basically happens when a condition is met. So for example, this is how we declare an if statement, if, and then double parentheses, and then we put our condition inside the parentheses. So for example, I'm going to say if my first variable, right, is equal to 3. However, this will not work. Let me tell you why. When you are searching for a condition, when you're expecting a condition in an if, in an if conditional statement, what you have to do is do double equals. You can't just do first variable equals 3. You have to do first variables equals 3. That way the code checks whether or not the first variable is 3 and doesn't declare the first variable or initialize the first variable as 3. So now we'll do parentheses or curly brackets so that we can write code. And maybe we'll just output something. There we go. Now the second conditional statement is an else. It occurs when the previous is not met. So like else, if this doesn't occur, if the first variable is not 3, then we're going to system.out.println the number is not 3. Alright, now let's talk about loops. So there are 3 main types of loops. There's the for loop. So this is how you declare a for loop. for and then double parentheses. For loop, the user can decide how many times the code inside it can run. So first we have to declare a counter variable. I'm just going to name it I and set it to 1. And then we're going to do the number of times we want to run this. So maybe let's do 3, right? And then we're going to increment this variable each time, basically adding 1 to it for each iteration. And then we're going to basically output the thing. Now what this should do is output I for the value of I each of the 3 times. So let's see if this runs. It should output 1, 2, and 3, and it does. Except it's on the same line because I did not do print end line, but that's okay. Now what we can do next is the while loop. The while loop is basically occurs every single time until an exception is met. So for example, I can do while double parentheses and write code in it. However, this does have the possibility to make infinite loops and stuff like that. So I'm not going to really write code for this one. And then we have the do while loop. So the do while loop is interesting because it occurs once, or at least once. This is important for getting the user input for a menu. That would be important because you don't want the user to not see the menu for the first time. So the do while loop, it makes sure that the user sees the thing for the first time until the user says something. And that's why the while loop also exists along with the do. Alright, now let's talk about methods. Methods are basically blocks of code that are run when it's called. So this is how to declare a method. You do not want to declare it inside your main method. So this public static void main args, you do not want to declare it inside of that, otherwise you'll get an error. You want to declare it inside of the public class of main itself. You don't want to declare a method inside a method. So what we're going to do is write static void, and then we're going to name our method. Let's do example method, right? And then double parentheses, and then curly braces. Now we're going to write our code in there. I'm just going to do a simple output, right? And we're just going to say this is from example method. And this is not going to run unless we call it. So inside our main method, we're going to have to call this example method. So we're going to do example method, all right? We're going to call it, and when we run, we should have a line of code that says this is from example method, and there we go. Now methods, there are more use cases to methods than just this. You can send variables to methods. You can send the address of variables to methods if you want to change the variable continuously, or you can return something from a method. This void statement will change most of that, but there's a lot more use cases of methods that I'll not get into, but methods are very interesting, and yeah. Alright, now let's talk about arrays. Arrays basically hold multiple variables and multiple values. So to declare an array, you just have to do the array type, or the variable type. So I'm just going to create an array of integers, and then 2 square brackets, like that. And then we're going to put our name. I'm just going to say array. And then that declares the array. Now we have to initialize the array to something. So to do that, we're going to put curly braces, and inside we can put multiple things. So now we can do 3, 4, 6, and then 7, 8. Yeah. I put a bunch of numbers in there. And I can also do string arrays, char arrays. There are multiple use cases of arrays, and they're very helpful when you don't know the amount of information a user is going to give you. It's also helpful in FRC, especially with cameras, because you don't know how much data a camera is going to give you, so arrays are helpful in that as well. But yeah, the last thing we're going to be talking about today is comments. Now, comments are very, very useful in code. And especially when code is extremely hard to read or complicated, and you're selling code to a user that might not know how the code works, Or it's important when you're debugging. So when you return to code that you haven't coded in a while and you notice an error, you can use comments to figure out where the error is or what a specific line of code is supposed to do. So comments can be written using 2 forward slashes. So I'm going to create a comment right here in front of my huge stack of variables. Okay, 2 forward slashes, and now Java will not interpret that as code. It will only interpret that as text, and it will not cause any errors. So I'm just going to say, this is a comment. Or I could say, I have declared variables. And things like that. I can put more comments and saying output tests, like that. And then I could put more comments. I've also put I commented out the while loop and the do while loop we've done before because there's no code in that, and if I run it right now without the comments, it will shoot me an error. But that's not going to happen because I've commented out code, and now it's going to treat that as text. Comments are very useful. You should definitely use them, especially in FRC Java. Alright guys, that was all for this video. We went through how to declare variables, how to output things, how to declare conditional statements, how to use them, how to create methods, how to use comments and arrays. But there's more to Java than this. And if you're still confused about things, I've left multiple useful resources in the description below. I've also included resources where you can start learning Java. And I also recommend if you are in high school to take, coding classes. It doesn't really have to be Java specific or anything like that, but any type of coding will really help you a long way in FRC. But yeah, guys, that was it for the first video. Hope you liked it. If you also found this information useful, please consider leaving a like. And if you want to see more videos like this, please consider hitting subscribe so that you are notified each time we upload. But thank you very much, and I'll see you in another video.